I have no intention to blame those faithful people found everywhere who go to meet bhikkhus out of a love of Dhamma. Rather, my intention is to inform people about the situation so they may know the right and proper way of doing things between bhikkhus and lay people, who can never be completely separated. When each side knows how to behave properly in relation to the other, their relationship becomes harmonious and straightforward. This conforms with the concern for virtue and for the welfare of the religion, which both sides share as they entrust their lives and their well-being to each other. The burden of the Khandhas. Beginning 18 January 1967, Venerable Ajaan Khao became very sick. It started out as a cold and a fever, but the characteristics of the fever changed and fluctuated in a variety of different ways, which caused other diseases to get in and develop and gain strength until he was unable to eat any food. In the beginning, when it was only a cold with a fever, he continued to make the effort to eat food with the other bhikkhus and novices at the front of the cave in Wat Thum Klong Pen. People who saw him there may have thought that he was simply suffering the effects of old age, as is common with old people. But because of the increasing complications brought on by the changes in his disease, the strength of his body deteriorated day after day, until eventually he could not go and eat food with the others in the cave. He continued to put up with the difficulties, forcing himself to eat a little food in his hut each day, until finally he was unable to eat anything at all. Gradually his strength became visibly weaker, until he had to rely upon the bhikkhus who were looking after him to help him every time he wanted to move. When news of Ajaan Khao's condition reached the surrounding area, waves of lay people and bhikkhus from that district rushed to the Wat to see him. In their hearts, many people firmly believed in him as a refuge they could confidently entrust their lives to. So when they heard that he was seriously ill, they were very perturbed, as if the sky and earth had collapsed and their hearts had been torn from their bodies. After the news had been broadcast, people came in hordes from all directions, lay people as well as bhikkhus and novices. They came to visit Ajaan Khao to see how he was. They were very eager to meet him and to pay their respects to him. For that reason, it appeared as if there was some large function taking place at Wat Thum Klong Pen while Ajaan Khao was sick. So many bhikkhus and lay people came from so many different places that the Wat was unable to look after them all. There was not enough bedding and food and other necessities to go around, so they just had to help themselves and each other as best they could to make up for what was lacking. A Wat is a place to live for bhikkhus who rely on the local villagers for the food they receive on alms round. It is not a place where wealthy people live, which most people already know. One advantage of Wat Thum Klong Pen is that it is very large, with lots of forest and hills and plenty of shady trees. There are also a large number of overhanging cliffs. It is altogether quite a good place to stay if one takes the forest, the hills, and the shady trees in the Wat as one's accommodation, where one can just rest and sleep, relaxed and unconcerned. Even though there were large numbers of people to feed, there was always plenty of food given to the bhikkhus on their daily alms round. From the start right through to the end of his illness, a period of over 4 months, amazingly, there was never insufficient food. Probably this was largely influenced by the protective power of Ajaan Khao's great virtue. All the many lay people, bhikkhus and novices who gathered together there seemed to be like children of the same parents or members of the same family. They stayed together quietly and peacefully, without anyone controlling them and without any untoward incidents occurring. They were all cheerful and smiling when meeting one another, talking together in a mild and pleasant manner, as if they had often met together and known each other for a long time. When Ajaan Khao first became ill, several senior Ajaans met to discuss the possibility of a disturbance to the peaceful atmosphere in the Wat, with so many monks and laypeople staying together. They were also eager to maintain discipline among the bhikkhus and novices who came into the Wat, so as to promote peace and harmony in their association with each other, and to foster an attitude of carefulness among all of them. The whole occasion passed off peacefully and harmoniously in every way, which deserves the highest praise. I don't think I or any of those present will ever forget that occasion. Since Ajaan Khao could not eat food, his condition steadily worsened. Meanwhile, more and more people kept pouring in from every direction. When I saw his condition begin to grow worse, I began to stay with him regularly to help look after the situation. Only occasionally did I return to my own wat for 1 or 2 nights before hurrying back to be with Ajaan Khao. I was very concerned about his health, but also I wanted to keep the atmosphere inside the wat as peaceful and proper as possible. But the power of his great virtue, Bharami, looked after and protected the whole situation, maintaining peace and good behavior. When Ajaan Khao could no longer eat, his physical condition deteriorated rapidly, which was quite visible to everyone around him. When asked about how he was and whether he would depart from the world, he gave the most impressive exposition of the nature of his condition, saying, "What is there to this body? When it dies, I'll feel no concerns and no regrets at all. All I can see in this body is a lot of earth, water, air, and fire, which are the constituent elements that make up the physical aggregate. That's all there is. When the one who knows, which is the heart, departs entirely, this body will immediately start to break down into its original elements of its own accord. If I were not concerned for the welfare of my bhikkhu disciples and for the lay people who have come here, I would have no qualms at all about dying at this moment. I would then come to the end of all acknowledgement and responsibility straight away, so there would be no further burden for me to carry on my shoulders. The word Analayo, free from attachment, which has been my name since my ordination, would then represent the truth, for the true one would arise then, perfect and complete. At present, my Analayo is not perfect, because the conventional aggregates, Sammuti Khandha, the 5 groups which form the body and mind, Pancaka Khandha, require my attention, so I must take full responsibility for them. In other words, I must constantly direct them in living, in eating, in sleeping, in urinating, in excreting, and in changing bodily postures and moving about, like an electric fan spinning constantly round and round. Since when did Sammuti, the relative world of supposition, ever become peaceful, still, and satisfied? It's bound to whirl around all the time. Both the external world and the internal world are constantly whirling. How can we ever hope to gain happiness and harmony from things which are always whirling about? Anyone who hopes to gain happiness and harmony from these khandhas, which are a deep well of suffering and anxiety, will always be disappointed, for none of the khandhas will ever fulfill his desires. I have been carrying these khandhas about for 80 years already, and I haven't seen anything truly satisfying coming from them. What stands out all the time is just dukkha, discontent, that's all. Both minor discontent and major suffering, which in one way or another are there all the time. I've never seen calm and happiness arise in the khandhas in a way that I could experience it clearly. Even at normal times, when I don't have fever or sickness, dukkha still appears throughout the khandhas, such as the aches and pains occurring throughout the various parts of the body. I have never experienced pleasure, sukha, in the khandhas. What people like to call pleasure is just a false concept, a common phrase that people like to use. In truth, this body and its various parts never clearly display anything pleasant for us to see. Instead, they only display the burden of suffering that we must bear, which can make us almost faint and die if the pain doesn't stop. We should not deceive ourselves about the khandhas, thinking that they will bring enough pleasure and happiness to please us. Instead, they are almost sure to bring endless suffering, which they load onto us so that we have to carry it about wherever we go. I myself acknowledge that I have been dragging these burdensome khandhas around for 80 years already. How much longer will I have to go on shouldering this burden? What is left for me to search for that should make me want to carry about this load of fuel and fire, with the view that these khandhas will bring me something wonderful? I have no doubts about these khandhas, both those which I am still living in, and those which have broken up and gone in the past. I am I, the khandhas are the khandhas. What's the point of mixing them up together? Simply let go of the khandhas entirely, Analayo, then one is complete as one should be. I freely admit that my heart is full of metta and compassion for my fellow bhikkhus and all the lay people. So, although I know that the Khandhas are nothing but suffering, I can see the value of going on with this life for the sake of those people who need my help. For myself alone, I am always ready to let go of these Khandhas, which indeed are a burden. They were truly a well full of tears for me when I used to covet them. But now I no longer covet them. I no longer worry about them. So I am prepared to release them, to go naturally according to their basic nature. I shall not resist or oppose the truth. When I resisted the truth in the past, all I got was a lot of suffering until I learned to dread it. So this time I shall not resist, but instead let the Khandhas go their natural way, which is the way of Dhamma, the unshakable truth. Those who have accepted responsibility for rescuing themselves by way of the principles of nature were never compelled to do so by anyone. Rather, it was their own necessity that compelled them. Thus it is necessary for all of us to take responsibility for ourselves. We must not be negligent. We must accept that the citta is the fundamental basis that determines our way of living and all the good that we do. It also determines the characteristic modes of behavior that we display externally, for which we must take responsibility by being constantly aware that we are the ones who do good and evil, so we must be responsible for our own external behavior. In other words, we ourselves are the ones who receive the results of the good and evil of whatever work or actions we do. We know that the results of what we do are not lost anywhere, but that they will flow back to their original cause, we who did them in the first place. The we I'm referring to here, which is the chief principle in people, means the heart, and the heart does not die, nor has it ever died since the remotest antiquity. But it has gone astray, wandering about to become involved in birth, being born into all sorts of states, both good and bad, under the overriding influence of the results, vibhaka, of the good and bad kamma which we have done. Especially important is the idea which some people have that after death there is just voidness, nothingness. This view is fundamentally wrong. The heart of the Lord Buddha and those of all the Arahants who have got rid of the kilesas, which would otherwise lead them into birth and death, have not been annihilated and reduced to nothing. They simply do not go wandering about searching for a place to be reborn. In contrast to the hearts of all others who have kilesas, which are the seeds that lead them to further birth and death, the hearts of the Lord Buddha and the Arahants are still their hearts, but they are in the state of nibbana without remainder, anupadisesa nibbana, of those who have completely got rid of all their kilesas. There are various ideas, such as, after death there is just nothingness, there is no such thing as evil, there is no such thing as merit, there is no such place as hell, there is no such place as heaven, there is no such state as nibbana. All of these are doctrines taught in the textbook of the kilesas that rule the triple universe. Having mastered these doctrines, the kilesas use them to govern the hearts of all living beings. No matter how severely they oppress living beings, they are not in the least afraid or concerned that anyone will dare to challenge their authority because their schooling is good and up to date. People accept it fully without reservations. All the knowledge that is learned from the textbook of the kilesas is bound to be knowledge which wipes out the truth of Dhamma. For example, the truth of Dhamma shows us that after death one is born again, whereas the knowledge which comes from the textbook of the kilesas teaches the opposite, that after death one is annihilated. In a similar way, Dhamma teaches that evil exists, merit exists, the hells exist, the heavens exist, and nibbana exists, whereas the teaching of the kilesas immediately denies all of them by teaching that the opposite is true. This being so, we Buddhists must examine these matters thoroughly and choose well. Otherwise, we are likely to be overwhelmed by the teaching of the kilesas, which will lead us over the chasm and down towards the great Avicii hell. All because we are deceived into believing the tricks of the kilesas to the point where nobody can help us, since a birth in hell gives us no chance to remedy the situation. To remedy and wash clean the kilesas and their teaching that are buried deep in our hearts, we must do so by means of the Buddha Dhamma, beginning now while we are still alive and the time is right. After we have died, the opportunity to do something about it will have passed. All that will be left then is the experiencing of the results of the good and evil actions we ourselves did as human beings. In the saying, attahi attano nato, the self is its own refuge, the Lord Buddha taught us to depend on ourselves, and not to expect to depend on anyone else in all the worlds of existence. He also taught that from this moment onward we should do good deeds for our own sake, which will make us feel comfortable and secure in our hearts for the rest of this life and after we die as well. We will then have Dhamma virtue to guard and protect us, which is very different from those who have little merit and little Dhamma in them. When they die, they are reborn in a realm which is disturbed and troubled accordingly. The kilesas that are Mara, the enemy of Dhamma, must also be Mara, the enemy of living beings everywhere, without a doubt. They show themselves by misleading beings and directing them only towards the fiery pit, which is the boundless mass of suffering where they find nothing that they can trust or hold on to as a refuge, even for a moment. The result is a combustible mixture of fuel and fire found in every nook and cranny, with no safe haven where beings can relax and breathe freely. The wisest of men in every age have always censured the kilesas. Never have they claimed that the kilesas make the world a peaceful place, or that the kilesas are things which bring equality and justice to the world. They have always been full of tricks and deceptions in every age and era. They have never lost their ability to cheat and deceive beings in the world who are so stupid that they are to be pitied. On the other hand, Dhamma possesses the gentleness of love and compassion to help beings in the world to get free from ignorance, to get free from suffering and torment of all kinds. It supports their self-development, gives relief and alleviates their suffering so that they gain peace and happiness. The difference between the kilesas and Dhamma is so enormous that it is almost impossible to make comparisons. They are always working at cross purposes. The kilesas are always deluding people, enslaving them and immersing them in the round of dukkha. Dhamma always gives support to people, drawing them up and out of the round of dukkha bit by bit until they can reach vimutti, complete liberation. So, as you can see, there is a great difference between the kilesas and Dhamma. I myself was the one who asked Ajaan Khao how he felt about his physical condition on that occasion. In response, he gave this powerful discourse, delivered in such a way that it appeared as though he had no serious illness, painful fever, or weakness in his body at all. The way in which he spoke out quite startled those who were listening. The tone and tenor of his voice, his manner and appearance, and the intensity of the Dhamma flowing out from his pure heart all belied his physical condition. Nobody could have imagined that he would be able to defy his frail condition to deliver such a strong and forceful exposition on the nature of the kilesas and Dhamma. Those listening were all smiling and cheerful, their ears sharp and their eyes bright. But for myself, I'm the kind of character who is never satisfied, so I felt I could never hear enough of the Dhamma which he had kindly expounded. I wished to hear even more of it, so I squeezed in a special kind of Dhamma question at the end. Ajaan Khao, after this you will get better day by day until you are completely recovered. I have no doubt about this, because the Dhamma which you have kindly given us just now is the kind of Dhamma that burns out and cleanses diseases from the Khandhas. So this illness is bound to break up and disperse. No kind of disease can withstand that kind of Dhamma. Even the kilesas, which are more robust and resistant than diseases, are bound to be destroyed by this powerful Dhamma. Ajaan Khao answered in an impressive, unforgettable way that was wonderful to hear. He said, Khandhas are Khandhas, sickness is sickness, kilesas are kilesas, Dhamma is Dhamma. Each is of a different kind. Medicines are appropriate for treating and overcoming sickness. Dhamma is appropriate for counteracting and destroying kilesas, but it is unsuitable for overcoming some kinds of illness. There are forms of sickness which should be curable by means of Dhamma, and there are others which cannot be cured in that way. Those who practice the way should take good note of this. Don't let your ideas, your beliefs, and your actions be in excess of what is right and reasonable. What I said today was pure Dhamma, delivered for the purpose of arousing the joy of Dhamma in those listening, while also getting rid of their kilesas. It was not connected with the Khandhas or with treating and curing this disease in the way you understand. It's not important whether the Khandhas live or die. What is important is whether any kilesas died and left the heart of the listener due to the power of the Dhamma I expressed. That is truly the most appropriate result for those who practice the way of Dhamma. So we must use wisdom to examine and think about that Dhamma teaching, for it will encourage us to promote the methods of mindfulness and wisdom that enable us to continuously extract the kilesas that are within us. In the time of the Lord Buddha, they listened to Dhamma with open ego, steadily bringing the Dhamma which they heard into themselves, and didn't let it leak out and drift away, passing through their ears and hearts uselessly, which is how most of us listen to it nowadays. So the results of counteracting and uprooting the kilesas that we should expect to get while listening to Dhamma hardly ever occur these days. In fact, people just as often accumulate kilesas while listening without being interested to consider whether they listen for the sake of Dhamma or for the sake of accumulating kilesas which laugh at Dhamma. When the Lord Buddha or the Savakas gave a talk on Dhamma, what they said came from the pure and simple truth of Dhamma in their hearts. They didn't give talks based on what they had committed to memory, like we do nowadays. Their practices and the way they went about doing things of all kinds, from the most ordinary to the most subtle, were all done to the best of their ability, with full knowledge of both the path and its stages, as well as the fruition in its various levels from the lowest up to the highest, which is vimutti, complete liberation. Their discourses, which were absolutely pure Dhamma, were given without any hesitation or uncertainty. This Dhamma poured out from the flow of the heart, blending in with the flow of the sound of their voices, so that those who heard it with a sincere intention to realize the truth were able to help themselves to the true Dhamma to their heart's content. They never failed to gain some benefit from listening to Dhamma, no matter how many kilesas there are, or how deeply ingrained they are. When mindfulness and wisdom shake them up and harass them without ceasing, the kilesas will be loosened up and uprooted bit by bit. In the end, the heart becomes an empty house void of all kilesas. Then the heart becomes filled with Dhamma in a way that is impossible to imagine. For that reason, we should make a determined effort to listen to Dhamma and to practice Bhavana wholeheartedly. When we are sincere in the practice of Dhamma, then the kilesas will gradually be loosened up and uprooted without any doubt. This is as true now as it was at the time of the Lord Buddha. Those who practice the way truly are able to reach the path, fruition, and nibbana in the same way as they used to then. This is what we should expect, for Dhamma is that nature which is timeless and unchanging. The middle way of practice, Madhyama Padipada, has always been the most appropriate Dhamma for destroying the kilesas so that they vanish from the heart. There has never been anything more superior in any age. So guard against the kilesas. They are antagonistic to Dhamma. Don't let them climb up on your head, or else Dhamma will immediately lose out. You must be very careful. There. I've said enough to act as a timely reminder to those loyal devotees who have made the effort to come and visit me, following the custom of those who have respect for their teacher. Venerable Ajaan Khao remained sick in the manner described above for more than 4 months. All the doctors who attended him, including Professor Uwe Ketasin and several other doctors and nursing staff from Udon General Hospital, were instrumental in helping him to recover. They did everything possible to help him from the start, treating him to the best of their ability until his health returned to normal due to the skill of the doctors and those who looked after him. After his recovery, he seemed to have a new lease on life, as though a new person was there in the place of the old Ajaan. I must ask the reader to forgive me for dealing so briefly with Ajaan Khao's lengthy illness. I realize how inadequate a description this is of what actually took place, but I am also old now, my health is not so good, and I'm kept busy dealing with a lot of different matters, which is like trying to keep up with the hoofprints of oxen inside a pen.